Hello and welcome to another edition of Random Access. My name is CJ. I'm going to be your personal host. Tonight we have John Farrell on the show, and he brought his gorgeous Ducati 999R superbike. John, what is a superbike?
It's a sport bike that there's a type of motorcycle competition called superbike racing. And superbike racing is a showcase for bikes that they sell to the public. So sport bikes that you could buy at the dealership. Of course, the race bike is a little different. They really tune them and get them all dialed in. They're a lot faster and a lot lighter. But basically, it's based on a bike that you can buy. And so Ducati made a 999 series and raced it in World Superbike. And they made a 99S, which is a little more upscale version. And this is the R bike, which has pretty much all the race gadgets on it. And so they have to sell so many of those to use it as the basis for superbike racing. So they brought 350 of these into the US in 2005. So this is one of the 350.
Unbelievable. It looks like it's in pristine shape. Now, it's an Italian bike, and it's got the Terminioni back end exhaust. Does that mean you can make pasta in this thing, or I better not?
Well, they do call them pasta rockets, so yeah. This thing's pretty hot. This exhaust system gets really hot, so you probably could cook something on it.
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
So what got you interested in the Ducati bike? Was it just calling your name one day, or were you looking around for it?
Well, I took a long hiatus from riding. I rode a lot early on. In about my mid-30s, I stopped riding. Family, son, all the responsibilities, so I had to be a responsible guy and hang up the riding for a while. And so I took a long hiatus, and then one day, probably 16, 17, 18 years later, I saw a picture of a Ducati, and I thought, wow, I'd like to ride one of those. So I started looking around, shopping around, and I bought not this bike, but a different Ducati to start. So when I was 55, I started riding again.
And have you actually raced this one?
No, I don't have the time to take it to the track. Unfortunately, we're a small business owner and we work all the time. So the thought was that eventually it would go to the track.
So what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen ride this thing? I mean, have you ever put any strange objects, like if you're delivering something interesting to your wife and just wanted to surprise her, or is it just for human riding?
Just me.
Just your body on there?
Just me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's really no place to put anything else on it. It's really designed as a race bike. So
I heard it has like a pancake exhaust system that's a little bit different than some of the other Ducatis. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, because this bike has a full carbon fiber body work except for the tail section. So you can see the carbon fiber body work in here. Because of the bodywork on this particular bike, the R bike, they had to design a special exhaust system. So this part here is flattened so it will clear the bodywork. So it's a special exhaust. They only made them for the R bikes, and they didn't make enough of them, so they were hard to find. But the guy before me found it.
Tweaked it up.
So he found it for me. So
nice.
Yeah, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah. So you're the beneficiary. Now the front end, it looks a little bit interesting. I'm not used to seeing a front end like that.
It's unique to this particular bike. The designer that designed this particular model fashioned the front part like a diesel locomotive. So diesel engines have two stacked headlights on them, and they kind of slope down. And then there's air movement lines on it, and then even the fairings they put on the side. So it gives it that kind of diesel locomotive look. So it's very aerodynamic.
So it's not just aesthetic, it actually makes the bike move a little bit more swiftly?
Yeah, the air moves around it really nicely. And in 2005, they built the first ones in 2003 and raced them in 3 and 4 in World Superbike. And then in 2005, they changed the bike and changed the fairings a little bit, and they made it even more aerodynamic. So it's the new and improved, at that time, it was the new and improved Ducati. So. But
there have been a lot of improvements since then. In 9 years, motorcycles have gone incredibly high tech.
They're amazing. I mean, the stuff that's on motorcycles now, traction control, wheelie control, launch control, race ABS brakes, semi-active, active suspension, and a new braking system they're now coming out with that allows you to brake hard in the corners without standing the bike up and losing control of it in case of a panic braking situation. You can't brake bikes in the corners really hard because the force automatically makes it stand up and you just run off the road or off the track. But with the new braking system, people are going to be a lot safer on them. But the bikes are getting more and more powerful. This was powerful in its day, but it's not as powerful as the ones that are out now.
How powerful? I mean, how fast could you get the 999R up to if you're racing this thing?
The top speed is a little over 170 miles an hour. And this bike is 150 horsepower from the factory. At the engine, the rear wheel horsepower, which is the real horsepower rating, would be like low 130s. This bike has been tuned much like they do with the race bikes, so this puts out 154 horsepower at the rear wheel. So the engine rating would probably be in excess of 170 horsepower, but the bike only weighs 399 pounds, so the power to weight ratio is phenomenal. So 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds.
Now, I've seen some bikes recently that don't even have a frame, and the engine's pretty much the core to the bike. What is that the trend, or is that just sort of a stylistic approach to bike making?
No, it was a trend for Ducati because power to weight ratio is significant in racing, and so Ducati's, as far as I know, is the only one that's doing the losing the frame, because this is kind of a trademark Ducati, this trellis frame here. It's always been the signature for Ducati for years. Well, the new bikes now, the engine is the midsection of where the frame used to be, so it makes the bikes lighter. They have a this is a 999cc bike. They came out with a 1098, 1198. Now they have 1199cc, all new design, and that has the frameless design on it. So the bike, not even the R version is probably lighter than this bike because there's no frame.
Now, let's say somebody wants to buy a motorcycle. Why would they buy a Ducati versus a BMW or a Honda or a Kawasaki? Is it just the prestige behind the name, or are there certain qualities that make a Ducati a better bike?
It's not that it's a better bike in some ways. It's the Italians design bikes differently. They look different. When I saw my first Ducati, I thought, wow, what is this? I had never seen a bike like it. And I had ridden Japanese bikes for years, and they're great bikes, and nothing to take away from them. But the Italians, Ferrari, Lamborghini, I mean, these guys know how to design things aesthetically, so they're really pleasing to look at as well as performance. And so you kind of get drawn into them. You see it and you go, oh, I think I'd like one of those. Yeah. And I did see this one for quite a while before I bought it, so it definitely hooked me.
How to convince the wife that you could go along with it?
It wasn't easy.
I can imagine.
She's not a fan. It's a solo seat for a reason. She doesn't want to ride on it, and she'd rather I didn't ride on it either.
Escape plan number 3. Mm-hmm. Now, the color is reminiscent, at least to me, as sort of like a red Ferrari Testarossa. Yes. Mm-hmm. Is that intentional, or is that just sort of a
Probably. They don't call it that. I don't know what the color red is. Ducati red, I guess. They've used this red color for years. But you're right. It's a lot like Ferrari. In the sunlight, it's amazing to see it in the sunlight.
And is this the original paint?
That's the original paint. Mm-hmm.
How do you keep it so beautiful? I mean, you just don't take it out very much, or?
No, I put about 2,500 miles a year on it. So I take it out. I sneak out in the weekdays, midday, nobody's around, take it up into the hills. So I get to ride it, but I don't commute on it. It's not really a bike you would do that on anyways. This thing sounds like a race car when it starts up. So it's...
Neighbors don't love you?
Not too thrilled, but in the middle of the day, in a weekday, I figure I'm not bothering anybody, so that's a good time to take it out.
It's your time.
Yeah, it really is my time. When I go motorcycle riding, when you ride motorcycles, you're just thinking about riding. That's all you're doing. You're not thinking about, boy, I should do this when I get back, or I've got this thing I need to do. It's so single focused when you're riding, and you should be that focused when you're riding, that when I come back after a nice ride, my brain is just calm as can be. It's serene.
It's like a meditation almost.
There's articles about it being meditative.
Right. Is there some book about Zen and
the art of motorcycle maintenance?
Right.
Yep,
it's kind of a combination of the spiritual and the awareness of the road. It becomes kind of a beautiful solitary journey.
Yeah,
almost like Huck Finn.
It really is. It's amazing. It's kind of like when you see a surfer and he's riding a wave. And they do a shot of the surfer riding the wave, and he's just into it. And when you lean this thing over into the corner and you're going around the corner, it's the same sensation. You're just totally into it, and you're just feeling the ride and going around the corner, and it doesn't get any better than that.
So I know that you don't have a lot of time because you're a business owner here in Mountain View, but what's the furthest you've taken the bike? What's the farthest you've gone?
Well, I took it down to Carmel once. Just to see how much it is to ride a super bike, a little more distance on it, because it's not a touring bike. So, but surprisingly, this bike for Ducati, I always had a reputation of being uncomfortable bikes because they're race bikes, so they're in that racing talk position. So this bike is actually quite comfortable.
Even in the racing position?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the guy who designed this bike really wanted to design it so it was more comfortable, and I've ridden this bike for a couple of hours, and normally sometimes on race bikes your wrists start to bother you, maybe your knees start to stiffen up a little bit, or your seat gets a little too much after a while. This thing is comfortable.
So not only is it pristine and beautiful and prestigious, but you can also ride it all the way to Carmel and feel okay physically without any pain or suffering.
Yeah, yeah, it was surprising, and it's adjustable. You can adjust the body position. You can move the tank, and everything can adjust forward and back. You can adjust the pegs up and down, and so they designed it so that you could adjust it to fit you.
Now I know you've been really busy, and you haven't really been able to race it. But if you had extra time, would you consider racing the bike, or is that something that's just sort of outside your area of comfort?
No, the next step would be, with something like this, would be to do track days, you know, because I've never been on a track with a bike like this. And there's classes, you can take classes, and they really teach you a lot of really good things to know when you're riding on the track and improving your skills overall. So I think if the next step would be to take track classes and then take this on the track and get comfortable with it. And then if you know, I mean, it happens, I guess. Guys get the urge to race, and then they end up racing.
It's a guy thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Could be a lady thing, too.
Yeah.
Now, one final question before we wrap up. Maintenance. Easy maintenance, high maintenance?
Well, I don't maintain it. I use these guys that are really good with Ducatis, and that's part of the reason I own a Ducati, is because I have somebody that can actually service this correctly. So but these guys are fussy. You got a full service every 6,000 miles, and then you do mid services in between. But I mean, they literally get into the engine at 6,000 miles and
high performance.
Yeah, so they really have to kind of you have to take care of it. But it's been good so far.
Obvious payoff.
Yeah.
John, thanks so much for being on the show.
Great.
Continued success and happiness with the bike, and we'll see you out on the road there.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on Random Access. We'll see you next time. Please don't be a stranger. You too. None of you.